What if the Queen's final words weren't about peace, forgiveness, or family unity, but about drawing a line that could never be crossed? Think about that for a second. For decades, the world believed it knew Queen Elizabeth II. The calm smile, the measured silence, the steady hand that guided the crown through wars, scandals, divorces, and abdications. But what if, behind closed doors, her last message was sharper than anything she ever said in public? But before we continue, please subscribe and turn on the notification bell for updates. Here's the unsettling question no one wants to ask out loud. What if the Queen's final words weren't meant to comfort, but to correct? According to a revelation attributed to Princess Anne, the most unfiltered royal of them all, the Queen left behind a message that was never written down, never officially recorded, and never meant for the public. A message delivered quietly, personally, and with finality. No press release, no palace statement, just words spoken once and meant to last forever. This is not the version of royal history most people recognize. We've been shown documentaries, interviews, carefully crafted explanations, and emotional appeals. But this story suggests something far colder, something far more deliberate. Ask yourself this. Why would Princess Anne speak now, after so much time has passed? Why would the one royal known for avoiding drama be the one to break this silence? Because timing matters. The monarchy is entering a new phase. Titles are being questioned, roles are being redefined, and public sympathy has started to shift. What once looked like a family dispute now looks more like a constitutional fault line. And at the center of it all stand Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. For years, the narrative was emotional. Pain, betrayal, escape. But what if the Queen saw something different? What if she believed clarity was kinder than confusion, even if it hurt? Here's the contradiction that stops people in their tracks. The Queen was a grandmother, but she was also a sovereign. And when those two roles collided, only one could win. This story matters now because silence has consequences, because assumptions have filled the gaps left behind by royal restraint, and because the alleged final message challenges everything people thought they understood about how this saga would end. If true, it means the Queen didn't leave things open-ended. She closed the door herself, and according to those who claim to have heard it secondhand, the words were not emotional. They were not angry. They were precise, calculated, final. But here's where everything takes a darker turn. Because if this message truly existed, it wasn't just about the past. It was about the future. And the moment Princess Anne chose to acknowledge it, she reignited a fire that had never truly gone out. And what she allegedly revealed next is what reportedly made tempers flare behind palace walls and beyond them. So why her? Why would the most private, no-nonsense royal suddenly become the keeper of the most explosive royal message in decades? That's the question that changes everything. Because Princess Anne is not known for leaks. She doesn't trade in sympathy. She doesn't court public approval. For most of her life, she has done the opposite of what modern celebrity culture rewards. She stays quiet. She stays loyal. And when she speaks, it's usually because silence has become more dangerous than truth. That's what makes this moment so unsettling. According to accounts circulating within royal circles, Anne didn't announce anything. There was no dramatic reveal, no headline-grabbing declaration. It surfaced the way the most serious truths often do, in a controlled setting, among people who already understood the weight of what was being said. And that alone tells you something important. If this were gossip, it would have leaked years ago. If it were rumor, it would have been denied immediately. But instead, it lingered, quietly, like a sealed envelope no one dared to open. Here's the key detail most people miss. Anne wasn't speaking as a commentator. She was speaking as a witness. As someone who, by long-standing royal custom, was often present when others were not. Someone trusted not to interpret, soften, or embellish. Someone who understood that certain words are meant to be remembered exactly as they were spoken. Ask yourself this. If the Queen wanted her final intentions misunderstood, would she confide them to Princess Anne? Of course not. And has always been the royal who does the uncomfortable work. She handles the unglamorous duties, the difficult conversations, the moments when emotions must be set aside for the sake of continuity. That reputation didn't happen by accident. And that's why what she allegedly acknowledged carried such force. This wasn't framed as opinion. It wasn't presented as interpretation. It was described as a moment A specific exchange. A final clarity delivered deliberately, not emotionally. And here's where the tension spikes. Because and didn't just reference a message. She allegedly made it clear who it was meant for, and who it was not meant to include. That distinction matters more than people realize. It suggests intent. It suggests foresight. It suggests the Queen anticipated fallout and chose certainty anyway. Now pause and think. Why would a monarch who survived decades of scandal choose to end her reign with something so absolute? Because, according to those close to the situation, ambiguity had already done enough damage. And this is where the atmosphere reportedly shifted. Because once and acknowledged the existence of the message, the question stopped being whether it was real, and became whether the people it concerned were ever supposed to hear it directly. And when word of what she had acknowledged began to circulate, even quietly, the reaction was not calm. It was anger. And that anger, according to multiple accounts, centered on one devastating realization. The Queen's final words were not open to negotiation. And what those words allegedly said next is what truly set this story on fire. What if the Queen didn't leave room for interpretation at all? That's the question that reportedly stunned even seasoned palace insiders when the alleged contents of her final message began to take shape. Because this wasn't a suggestion. It wasn't guidance for the future. And it certainly wasn't wrapped in sentiment. According to those familiar with the account attributed to Princess and the Queen's words were delivered with the same calm certainty she used to open Parliament or address a nation in crisis. No raised voice. No emotion. Just a conclusion. And that's what made it devastating. The message, as it has been described, wasn't framed as punishment. It wasn't reactive. In fact, the most unsettling part is how forward-looking it was. This wasn't about what had already happened. It was about what must never happen again. Think about that. After 70 years on the throne, Queen Elizabeth II had seen every possible version of royal conflict. Abdication, public divorces, family members trading dignity for attention. She understood something most people never grasp until it's too late. If you don't draw a line, the line will be drawn for you. According to the account, the Queen spoke plainly about legacy. About the crown not as a family heirloom, but as a structure that only survives if its rules are respected. And this is where the alleged message turns ice cold. Because she did not speak in hypotheticals. She spoke in absolutes. Those present allegedly understood immediately that this was not a temporary decision. It wasn't something that could be revisited under pressure, popularity, or emotional appeals. It was final because it was meant to remove uncertainty. And here's the contradiction that unsettles people the most. Publicly, the Queen had always emphasized love, inclusion, and reconciliation. Privately, she may have believed that kindness without boundaries had already cost the institution too much. Ask yourself this. Is it cruel to close a door, or crueler to leave it half open forever? The alleged message suggests she chose certainty over sentiment. And in doing so, she may have knowingly accepted that some members of her own family would see it as betrayal. But she said it anyway. Because from her perspective, this wasn't about emotion. It was about preventing future chaos. About stopping a slow erosion before it became irreversible. And that's why the words reportedly landed like a shockwave. Because once spoken, they reframed everything. Past interviews, public grievances, even future expectations. All of it suddenly collided with a single, immovable decision. And here's where the tension escalates. Because the people most affected by this alleged final wish were not in the room when it was spoken. They heard about it later, indirectly. And when that realization set in, the reaction was not quiet disappointment. It was fury. Because what the Queen had allegedly decided didn't just redefine the monarchy. It redefined the future of an entire branch of the family. And the moment that understanding fully sank in is when this story reportedly stopped being about legacy and became about anger. And what happened next is where the silence broke in ways no one expected. Silence can be louder than shouting. And in this case, the silence that followed is what raised the most eyebrows. Because when word of the Queen's alleged final wish filtered back to those it concerned most, there was no immediate denial. No carefully worded clarification. No attempt to soften the blow. Just a sudden, noticeable stillness. The kind that usually signals shock before anger finds its voice. Here's the question people inside royal circles reportedly asked first. Why would something framed as a private, final message provoke such a visceral reaction? The answer, they say, lies in expectation. For years, the belief lingered that time would heal everything. That distance would eventually give way to reconciliation. That the door, while closed for now, was never locked. But this alleged message didn't just close the door. It removed the hinges. According to accounts from those familiar with the fallout, the anger wasn't about titles alone. It was about permanence. About the realization that no amount of public pressure, media sympathy, or future negotiation could reverse a decision described as final. That changes the emotional equation completely. Because when something feels temporary, you can live with it. You can plan around it. You can wait it out. But when something is final, it feels like rejection, even if it was never intended to be personal. This is where the emotional contradiction sharpens. On one hand, the Sussexes had built a narrative around independence and freedom from royal constraints. On the other, this alleged message suggested that independence came with irreversible consequences. Not symbolic ones, structural ones. Ask yourself this: can you truly walk away from something and still expect it to shape itself around you? According to those who witnessed the reaction secondhand, the fury stemmed from a sense of being written out. Not by public opinion, but by the one person whose authority could never be challenged. And here's the detail that reportedly stung the most. The message wasn't framed as punishment for past behavior. It was framed as a safeguard for the future. That implies something far more unsettling. It suggests the Queen believed the risk wasn't over, that the story wasn't finished. That belief alone would be enough to infuriate anyone who felt misunderstood for years. And yet, those close to the late monarch insist this wasn't about mistrust. It was about containment, about drawing a clear boundary so the institution could move forward without constant renegotiation. But from the outside looking in, it felt cold, calculated, unforgiving. And when people feel excluded from history rather than merely criticized, anger tends to follow. That anger, sources say, didn't erupt publicly. It simmered, quietly, strategically. Because reacting too quickly would only confirm what the Queen may have feared in the first place. Which brings us to the most unsettling part of all. Because according to those who believe this message was real, the Queen didn't just anticipate anger. She prepared for it. And the reason she did is what takes this story into an even darker, more calculated territory. And that's where the final chapter truly begins. What if the Queen knew this reaction was inevitable? That question changes how everything looks in hindsight. Because if the alleged final message truly existed, then the anger that followed wasn't a miscalculation. It was a cost she knowingly accepted. Think about who Queen Elizabeth II was in her final years. Not a young ruler learning on the job. Not a monarch swayed by headlines or trending outrage. She was someone who had already outlasted her critics, her scandals, and even her own generation. When she spoke at the end, she had nothing left to prove. That's what gives this story its emotional gravity. If the Queen drew a line so firmly, it suggests she believed uncertainty would do more damage than division. That leaving things open would invite endless renegotiation, endless grievance, endless instability. And in her mind, that may have been the greater betrayal of duty. This is where many people feel torn. On one side, there's empathy. Family is family. Children grow up. Circumstances change. Isn't reconciliation always possible? But on the other side is reality. Institutions don't run on hope. They run on rules. And the Queen spent her life enforcing one central principle. The crown must outlive everyone, including her own children. That's the uncomfortable truth many avoid. According to those who believe the account shared by Princess Anne, the Queen's final message wasn't about punishment or exclusion for its own sake. It was about closure. About ending a chapter cleanly, so the next one could begin without confusion. And here's the part that lingers long after the shock fades. Final words carry a different kind of authority. They can't be argued with. They can't be revised. They exist outside the reach of public pressure. That's why they hurt more. And why they last longer. For Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, if this message was real, it wasn't just a decision. It was a verdict delivered without appeal. Ask yourself this. If you were in their position, would you see it as cruelty or consequence? And if you were in the Queen's position, would you have chosen differently? That's why this story refuses to fade away. It forces people to confront a hard truth about power, legacy, and boundaries. Sometimes love doesn't look like inclusion. Sometimes it looks like saying no and standing by it. As the monarchy moves forward, the question isn't whether this alleged message was fair. The question is whether it worked. Did it bring clarity, or did it plant a resentment that will surface again when no one expects it? Because if there's one thing history teaches us, it's this: royal silence is never empty. And the echoes of final words have a way of resurfacing when the crown feels most secure. And what resurfaces next may be far more revealing than anything said so far.